Oli here, and this is my review of Mawdryn Undead, the third story of the 20th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor. Mawdryn Undead is a 126 story overall, it's 4 parts long, and is written by Peter Grimwade. And the Mawdryn Undead also kicks off the Black Guardian Trilogy, which dominates most of this season, and the Mawdryn Undead also marks the halfway point of the Peter Davison era. So the plot of Mawdryn Undead is as follows. Turlo may seem like a normal pupil at a boys' boarding school, but he's actually an alien from another planet. When the menacing Black Guardian asks him to kill the Doctor in return for a trip home, the boy quickly agrees. By coincidence, Turlo's maths teacher is an old friend of the Time Lords. But why doesn't the Brigadier remember that? The Doctor, along with his friends Tegan and Nissa, is about to find out. So that is the plot of Mawdryn Undead. So I think Mawdryn Undead is a brilliant story, without a doubt, one of the best stories of the Peter Davison era, and definitely the best story in the Black Guardian trilogy. Even though this story does unknowingly introduce the unit dating controversy, and I'll explain what it is later on in this review. The production was quite good, even though the sets of the Benedon School are quite basic, but I liked it, and as you know, if you've been following this channel, you know that I do find the basic things quite interesting. It's seeing as it's a sci-fi show, and you have like basic ordinary things like schools, boarding schools, and stuff like that. I did like Mawdryn's ship, and it looked very majestic for a spaceship, and how Tegan put it as the ship pretty much looked like the Queen Mary. I really enjoyed the music of this story, although some moments where the music was quite dramatic, especially the scene when the Doctor, Nissa, and Tegan ran out of the TARDIS after landing on Mawdryn's ship. I thought the script was quite good, some good dialogue there, and I think definitely that this story is Peter Grimwade's best story that he's actually contributed for Doctor Who. And the direction by Peter Moffat was quite good as well, so to speak. And I thought the plot was quite good. I liked how he incorporated the return of the Black Guardian, and obviously after Revenge, because the Doctor refused to give the keys to time to him, which is, though why it's taken 4 years for him to do so is a bit of a mystery to me, but and the Brigadier, who was quite vital to the plot, even though he wasn't actually meant to be in the story, and I think it was initially written for Ian Chesterton, the Doctor's first companion. He was meant to have been in the story, but then I think William Russell was unavailable, so the Brigadier's inclusion did actually cause the unit dating controversy, and obviously this is when things start becoming very contradictory. Because Mawdryn Undead is actually set between 1983 and 1977, and I was teaching maths at the boarding school. Well, but if one actually follows the scripts as from previous Doctor Who stories and the timelines and all that, then it kind of does make sense. Especially this was in the Troughton era, because let's have a look at this. So the Web of Fear was set at least 40 years after the Born with Snowmen, which was set in 1935, which definitely puts it to 1975. And the Brigadier was still in the army, as it was a colonel. And the invasion is said to have been set in 1979, which is set 4 years after the Web of Fear. And UNIT had been recently formed around that time, and the Brig was definitely a member of UNIT and is a Brigadier now. So, and that pretty much indicates that a lot of the Third Doctor's era was set in the 1980s, so to speak. Which is why in the New Who we have jokes saying date by the dating protocol 70s to 80s. So the contradiction there is that the Brigadier pretty much retired from UNIT before he was even formed. But this issue wasn't really there in the Third Doctor's era, and the years weren't really explicitly said. And I think I remember Terence Dix was saying that he intentionally didn't include the dates in certain scripts to avoid any form of confirmation. And I think there was a scene in Day of the Daleks where she was saying the dates, but she didn't actually say the year when someone was asking her. I think this was when she was sent to the 22nd century. I think it was. Yeah, but she was saying the date, but she wasn't actually saying the year. So it does get a bit trickier as stories go by. And I think even in Flux, the Jodie Whittaker's last series actually complicated the timeline even more, which, and as I said before, this is the reason why in New Who we say that they always say, depending on the dating protocol, 70s and 80s. aside from all that, this is actually the first story in the Black Guardian Trilogy, and the Black Guardian returns. So he hides an alien in the school by Tvisla Turlo to try and kill the Doctor so he can take him back home to his planet, to his own planet. But then obviously, I think the Black Guardian has his own sort of motives, and but Turlo is unable to kill the Doctor, and knowing that the Doctor is not who he says not who the Black Guardian was claiming to be, because I think in the first scene, the Black Guardian was telling the Doctor, telling Turlo that the Doctor was evil, and then Turlo ends up meeting the Doctor, and the Doctor's not like that at all, and that's why the hesitancy was there to kill him. But the Black Guardian was always putting pressure on him. So the boarding school element was quite interesting, and this is actually based on Grimmaid's experience in the boarding school, which was quite interesting. There were some very good moments, especially the part 1 cliffhanger. This is when Turlo grabbed the rock and was about to bash the Doctor's head in, but he was unable to do it. And I also like the scene when the Doctor met the Brigadier in 1983, and the Brig was unable to remember the Doctor for some. I think it was due to Tegan and Nyssa meeting the Brigadier in the 1970s, 1977, and then the Doctor was pretty much recalling the names of his previous companions. Things like Sarah Jane, Liz Shaw, and Joe Grant, and the Brigadier was starting to remember them, and then he started remembering the faces of the enemies. I think it was Daleks, Cybermen, whatever. I think Autons, whatever, and then he suddenly started remembering the Doctor's face, and I think this was in part 2. And the cliffhanger for part 2 was quite good as well. This is when the Brigadier in the 1970, and Tegan and Nyssa were in 1977, and they meet up with the Brigadier and they return in the TARDIS, and then they meet Mawdryn, who they thought was the Doctor. The moment the Doctor was trying to return to Earth, he couldn't remember who Mawdryn was. The Doctor couldn't get back to that place because Mawdryn had did something to Tegan and Nyssa, so it was causing them to whereas the tune of the TARDIS was traveling, they were getting older, but at the same time the Doctor was reversing it. They're trying to go back in time, and then it turns out they were younger. And fun fact, young Nyssa was actually played by Lucy Benjamin, who's known for playing Lisa Fowler in EastEnders. So on to the acting, which was excellent as usual. Peter Davison was quite good here. I think it was excellent. The Doctor was very energetic in the story, and I liked seeing that it was pretty much clear that Davison has properly settled into the role now. And I really liked his rapport with Brigadier and Turlo to an extent, and that is explored later on. I really liked the cliffhanger for part 3 when he told Nyssa and Tegan that if he helped Mawdryn, he'll pretty much kill the Doctor completely and wrap up his regenerations. And it did actually help with Five's development. He was actually willing to go through with Mawdryn's experiments to save Nyssa and Tegan, but it doesn't. But he was literally about to, but then as soon as the two brigadiers meet, it doesn't happen, and I think that pretty much ends up killing Mawdryn. Sarah Sutton was quite good. And Nyssa and Tegan actually do some heavy lifting in the story, which is good for once, as was the TARDIS ends up in 1977 when they meet the Brigadier from 1977. They actually end up bringing Mawdryn into the TARDIS, who they see because they saw like a space capsule near the school, and then they assume it to be the Doctor because he was wearing the Doctor's old clothes. I think it was. And he was looking Burton disheveled and was wearing and Mawdryn decided to wear the Doctor's old coat. Which I also liked how Nyssa let out a nice scream when her and Tegan and the Brigadier saw old Mawdryn's true form, which was this old alien-looking sort of creature. Janet Fielding was good as well. Tegan was actually paired with Nyssa for a good chunk of the story, which was quite good, and she actually met the Brigadier. She first met the Brigadier in 1977 and brought him into the TARDIS. When her and Nyssa met Turlo for the first time, she was very distrustful of Turlo, whereas Nyssa thought he was quite nice. Tegan's suspicion was right because obviously he was trying to kill the Doctor, thanks to the Black Guardian, but no one really knew that. But then her and Turlo do get along later on. And Tegan was, I did like at the start of the story, Tegan was asking the Doctor if the Morrow will return, and the Doctor assures her that it won't happen again, on TV anyways. Nicholas Courtney returns as the Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, last seen in the Terror of the Zygons, and now he's back without unit because he retired and he's now a school teacher. And this is actually one of the very few stories where the Brigadier is actually important to the plot, as it involves two Brigadiers. There's the Brigadier from 1983, who has no memory of the Doctor whatsoever, and you have 1977, and from the Brigadier from 1977, who just recently retired from unit and does remember the Doctor. And I think Nicholas Courtney was very good in the story, and I think it's definitely one of his best performances. I really like the scene when the Brigadier from 1983 was remembering his time from unit, and it was a very good scene. It was also my favorite scene as well. He works quite well with Peter Davison and other Doctors as well, and it's great to see him back again, and we do see him once again in the Five Doctors. And last but not least, we have our new companion, Visla Turlo, as but he's referred to Turlo mostly, and he's played by Mark Strickson. Turlo is an alien posing as a schoolboy in a boys' private school. He gets into a car accident with a fellow student named Hippo. That's how he meets the Black Guardian. And the Black Guardian asks him to kill the Doctor, and he tells Turlo that the Doctor is evil and tries to get Turlo to kill the Doctor, but then Turlo can't go through it because he knows the Doctor's not evil. But then the Black Guardian is insisting that he must kill the Doctor so he can return home. And so Strickson had a very good debut, even though Turlo doesn't really do a great deal here other than trying to kill the Doctor. But yeah, it was a very good introduction. He does play a vital part in the Black Guardian trilogy. Turlo is definitely one of my favorite companions from the 1980s because I think he's a very complex character and a complex companion, and one of the very few companions in the classics that actually has a nice story arc / storyline. He does have a bit of a cheeky personality when he was pretty much egging on Hippo to come with him for a joyride in the Brigadier's car. Plus, I do think he's a lot better than Adric, and Turlo is actually the last male companion of the classic series. He does get some good character development during his time in the TARDIS, and during the Black Guardian trilogy, it's pretty evident that Turlo is not evil, and I think he's just a troubled soul who just wants to go home, and we find out more about his past in later stories, I should say. There weren't that many side characters in there. They didn't really contribute much to the plot, but most of them were pretty much forgotten about during the story. I think there was Hippo, and then obviously there was the guy was that was with Turlo in the car crash, and I think it was one of the teachers that was talking. He was telling the Brigadier about the solicitor that was the solicitor in Chancery Lane that was managing Turlo. But we do find out who the solicitor is in Turlo's final story. On to the enemies of the story. First off, we have the Black Guardian returning. He wants Turlo to kill the Doctor, or at least separate the Doctor from his TARDIS. And every time Turlo failed to see an opening and trying to kill the Doctor, the Black Guardian will pretty much berate Turlo, and that's what he pretty much does throughout this entire trilogy. And it was good seeing the Black Guardian again, and Valentine Dial reprises the role from, I think it was the Armageddon Factor. Black Guardian doesn't really pose a huge threat in this story, which is alright because he's very much like a greater scope villain during the next two stories. And of course, the main villain of the story is Mawdryn. He is a scientist that wants to discover the secret of how the Time Lords regenerate, which is ironic because 37 years after the story aired, we'd actually do find out how with that whole debacle of the Time Lord regeneration and all that. So he was cursed with unwilling. So Mawdryn was cursed with unwilling internal regeneration. So he and his followers stole a metamorphic symbiotic regenerate, and they used it on themselves. Which was the reason for the immortality. And was there, which was causing them to mutilate and regenerate. So Mawdryn pretty much regenerated after tricking Nestor and Tegan into thinking that he was the Doctor in 1977 and gained access to the TARDIS. He wanted the Doctor to give up the rest of his regenerations so he can use their energy to end their lives. So this almost happened, but then when both brigadiers met each other, it released some energy that was enough to kill Mawdryn and his followers. Mawdryn was a very good villain. He wasn't as threatening as other villains, but he was dangerous enough of wanting to take the Doctor's regenerations. So on to the faults of the story. I think the main fault was the unit dating controversy, which is a big glaring pain to ignore, but some can overlook it, but then it's not as it can make me feel very picky about stuff. It is something that can't be ignored, but then it's Doctor Who. Nothing, there's no canon that's actually set in stone. And the other thoughts that annoyed me is how Tegan and Nissa and the Brigadier thought that Mawdryn was the Doctor. Like, I don't really understand how they did not see that was not the Doctor. Mawdryn's clothes are very much burnt off, and then he sounded nothing like the Doctor. And I think having this when Tegan carrying the Igibor was a bit unneeded, so to speak. But yeah. But I do think Mawdryn Undead is a great way to kick off the Black Guardian Trilogy, and I think it's a love letter to fans of the Poe-2 era like myself, despite being some contradictions with the date and all that. So I give this story a 9 out of 10. My next review will be Terminus, which sees the departure of Nissa. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought of this story and this review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Please ring the bell if you want to see any other, put the bell, whatever these YouTubers say, just put the bell if you want to be notified on any other videos I post. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Until then, see you later.